Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is NFL Week 16. 3 regular season weeks left. That is it. And then we will be into the playoffs just like that. But we're getting to that time of year where injuries are mounting, motivation's a question mark. You've got all kinds of teams that are maybe kind of tanking for a better draft pick, teams that are kind of showing signs of quit. Giants. We'll get to them in just a little bit. But all kinds of different intangibles that you kind of have to factor into your betting and your handicapping at this time of the year in the NFL. And back once again, as always, to help us out, sort through this mess, it's Philip Nelson, our quarterback, former pro and college quarterback. Philip, good to have you again with us. How are you?
Great to be back on. Last week was a tricky one. There were some ups and downs, but it's getting exciting in the season, and there's some races, some games to be won, some divisions to be that are still up for grabs, and we'll see what happens this week. I'm excited for it, and we get some football on Saturday too.
Looking back on Week 15, just quickly, because that's the one thing we've been pressed for time with some of these shows when we've been recording them. But I do want to get some thoughts just from you on last week, some of the things you saw, player performances that impressed you, team performances that impressed you, or team performances that did not impress you. What kind of sticks out to you based on the stuff you saw last week in the NFL?
Yeah, so you know what? First off, I'll start off with that Thursday game, Rams 49ers. I mean, just a crappy weather game. Even so, though, the Rams, I mean, the offense wasn't really moving the ball that well. I was really shocked to see Cooper Kupp, how not involved he really was. But, I mean, weather was a big indicator there. The Packers, man, I mean, they
how about Devondre Campbell just saying, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
You want to put
Devondre
me in the game because
Campbell,
one of our guys is hurt there, Greenlaw? I'm not going in. I don't want to play. See ya.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually played with Devondre in Minnesota too. So, to be honest, it doesn't surprise me. He was a guy that came in from JUCO.
So you got a personal tie to him then.
Yeah. So, and he was a good dude, but he plays with his heart on his sleeve, and you clearly saw it there. So, but yeah, moving on, Packers Seahawks. I think the Packers have one of the most creative running games in the league, and I mean, you see all the different ways they feed Josh Jacobs. So, really impressed with the way the defense played out against the Seahawks there too. Geno obviously getting hurt. I didn't think that they looked too great there. Ravens did exactly what we thought that they do. The Jets, I think that, the Jaguars, that was kind of an interesting game as well, but the Jets finally pull one out. And then other than that, I mean, I know we just talked about this a little bit before we got on, but the Chiefs, I mean, the Browns 6 turnovers and they still were only able to win by 14, so a lot of interesting things here. The final point I'm going to make here, I saw this earlier, was the Vikings are in control of their destiny. If they win out here, there's a chance that they actually become the 1 seed, which is actually really interesting to talk about here. So,
yeah, and the door is open now with Detroit obviously losing to the Buffalo Bills, their second loss, and what a game that was.
What a game.
You talk about comparing the Rams and 49ers debacle and that mess and that snore fest to what we saw in Detroit Motor City last Sunday with the Bills and the Lions. I mean, you talk a little bit as a quarterback yourself, Josh Allen, man. What the hell is with this guy, and what is he doing? How is he playing like this right now? He is playing at an incredible level. He's put on the cape. He's clearly Superman. He has definitely carried this Bills team, because you look at the defense 2 weeks in a row, they haven't played all that great against the Rams and the Lions, and yet they almost beat the Rams just because of Allen was superhuman. And then last week you saw what he did against the Detroit Lions. I mean, he threw that one ball in the red zone early in the game. It's like a diagonal throw across his body, has enough zip on it to get it in there to his receiver on the run, throwing across his body diagonally. The ultimate no-no usually for a quarterback, and he makes it look easy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, obviously not on Josh Allen's level or even close to it, but what I can tell, and I've experienced this feeling before too, he's in a zone. He is in an absolute zone. He has so much confidence, and you can tell how loosely he's playing right now. And I mean, the little shovel pass, the jump pass that he just, when you start doing things like that, the game is coming to him. He's not forcing anything. And the other thing that's really impressive about all this is
I think you're talking about the one that got taken away by a
the one that got taken away. But like just the fact that he's willing to just naturally, like, I mean, he didn't plan that. That's not that. These are all reactions that are coming from him. And so he's in a zone right now. And, I think another thing that is allowing him to be in that zone is that he doesn't have a receiver in his ear saying, hey, man, I'm open all the time. Give me the ball. He is letting the defense dictate where the ball goes. And he likes his guys. I think this is a team that's on the rise, clearly. They have a lot of team chemistry right now. And Josh Allen is putting the cape on.
He's now minus 1,000 to win the MVP this year, and obviously the heavy favorite to win the regular season NFL MVP award. Then you got Lamar at plus 750, Saquon Barkley at plus 1,400, Jared Goff plus 2,000. So it's really going to be one of those four, but there's no doubt. It's more than likely going to be Josh Allen who's going to end up getting what would be his first NFL MVP award. He's played MVP caliber in the previous years, but I think this year is going to be the year he's going to get recognized for it, just because of what the Bills lost from last season, especially at wide receiver. When you think of Gabe Davis gone, Stephon Diggs gone, those were their top two receivers last year. I mean, you're working with a rookie in Keon Coleman. You're working with Kincaid at tight end. You're working with Cooper just got there midway through the season. Mac Hollins, with all due respect, he's a journeyman receiver, and you're working with these guys, Curtis Samuel, you go on down the list, and Shakir's very good, but I think Shakir, he's looked like a number one receiver, but I think Allen's play has elevated Shakir to look like a number one receiver. I mean, with everything that he lost last year and the level he's playing, there's a big reason why he's a heavy favorite to win that MVP.
And we've seen mobile quarterbacks be really, really good at throwing as well and everything. But the 6'7", 240 pounds is a whole different beast, being able to run like that, because what happens and what he's
got great speed for a big guy, and we know he's tough as fuck to bring down.
Well, and that's the thing. He doesn't have to necessarily avoid hits. I mean, I know that he's gotten hurt and he has, the finger thing and whatever, but when you play man coverage versus Josh Allen, all he has to do is find a lane and all the eyes are turned and he's off and running. And so, one of the things I saw the Lions do to him was they actually double spied him. So Josh Allen's dropping back, and they had not just one spy, because one spy can't catch him. They had two spies. So if he rolls out to the right, this guy has a way to cut him off. He goes to the left, this guy has the angle on him. So I mean, you got teams that are doing double spies in man coverage, and it's completely changing everyone's scheme, which is amazing to see.
That one guy is playing at such a high level that for the first time maybe in NFL history, a defense is employing two spies in the middle of the field to try to corral this guy.
Right.
When it's usually just one at most, because and that's the problem. How many times we see this with Mahomes too over the years, but especially this year with Allen, where you got the receivers covered one-on-one down the field. You've got the middle of the field taken away, and you got the pass rush to try to get to him, but you don't get there. Everyone's covered down the field, and then all of a sudden there's Josh Allen breaking your back with a 10, 20, 50, 30-yard run. And you just can't cover everything as a defense. And playing Josh Allen, that certainly comes to the forefront, that it's very difficult to cover everything when this guy can just make plays on the run and just contain when the pass rush doesn't get there. And like I say, you can have all the receivers covered down the field, and he'll still find a way to make a play. And certainly he's done that throughout the course of the season. All right, we'll be making some plays on the betting board here this week in the NFL. Not as many, though, as usual, because this is a tricky card and there's a lot going on. But we will begin with a good one, actually, on Thursday Night Football. Denver Broncos, Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers 2.5-point home favorites. 42 is the total here in this game. Denver obviously has played some terrific football of late. There's no doubt they're rolling. They're playing great. I don't think they played that great, though, against Indy. As someone that watches as much of every game as I can, but I watched a good amount of that game. And to me, 31-13 is a little bit misleading. The Broncos only got, 200 yards of total offense. By far, it was one of the worst games that Nix has played in a while. Bo Nix had 20 of 33 passing, 130 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions as well. you definitely know that he had some trouble there with the turnovers. The good news is that Anthony Richardson struggled. 2 interceptions, 17 of 38 through the air. Jonathan Taylor ended up getting going for a decent amount on the ground, 107 rushing yards. Of course, he was also the dope that ended up dropping the ball right before the goal line, and it would have been a Colts touchdown. Instead, it's a touchback. How is this happening still? And it happened in another game, too, last Sunday. How is this shit happening? How are we that stupid as a football player to still be doing this, to drop the football before you break the plane of the goal line when you are about to score a touchdown? How are you allowing this to happen? Get your fucking ass right in the end zone and then drop the football. Phil, this is ridiculous. This is absurd. This is embarrassing. And if I'm a coach and I see a player do that, I'd be threatening to cut their ass right on the spot for doing this. I wouldn't put up with it. I wouldn't tolerate that nonsense. And that's what it is. Nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like?
I agree. I mean, it's absurd, and it's just a bunch of it's. To be honest, to sound like an old head here, it's a generational thing. I think these kids think that they look cool doing it or something like that. I don't know. I mean, because I feel like it started.
What's cool about costing your team a touchdown and 7 points? What's cool about that?
I don't know, man. Trust me, there's a lot of things I quit. I don't think the gritty's pretty cool, but man, that took off.
Yeah, it did. But it happened twice. In the NFL, this is the highest level of football. Professional. There's nothing professional about that. Sorry. No. When you're dropping the ball, get fully in the end zone. Get right into the middle of the end zone before you release the football. Yeah. So that it's a touchdown. It's absolutely absurd. So the Broncos didn't play well last week. Their best, but they still won and they still covered. Why? Well, because the Colts tried some trick play, by the way. And Adonai Mitchell, the guy out of Texas, throws the ball back to Anthony Richardson on a trick play, and it gets picked off by Benito, who's played great for Denver on defense. He seems to make a big play every single week, and that really killed the spirit and the momentum of Indy, and they really weren't the same after that. And the Colts or the Broncos got a 31-13 win. What happened to the Chargers? And look, I'm happy. I liked the Bucs last week, as I mentioned on the show, against the Chargers. But to see the way they just crumbled in the second half was shocking to me. It was actually a close game, 17-13 Chargers at halftime, but then a 27-0 second half. They shut out the Chargers in the second half, 27-0 Bucs, and they win big, 40-17. Hard to explain why the Chargers defense played that poorly. I know Baker Mayfield and the Bucs offense was very good. They ran the ball with Bucky Irving and Rashad White. Mike Evans had a huge day, 159 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns against that secondary. That's not a bad secondary the Chargers have. And they just somehow got torched, and they lose 40-17. I still think it's a better team and a better defense than that. And I think there's a good chance we may see that on display. I mean, this is a prideful team, especially on that side of the football. I'd be very surprised, if they don't rebound and have a better defensive effort here in this game. I just can't see that secondary being just shredded like that once again. Now, the Chargers have had issues stopping the run lately on defense as well. And certainly they've had some injuries. Perriman, we'll see if the linebacker plays. He's key in stopping the run. If he plays, that should help. But the good news for them is the Broncos don't run the football very well. And they haven't run the football very well all year. A lot of it has been Bo Nix throwing the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare. Justin Herbert clearly re-aggravated the ankle, too, in that Tampa Bay game. I think that played a role in the Chargers' struggles in the second half. And keep in mind, for a guy that's on a wonky ankle, which has been bothering him all season on and off, here you are now in a short week, not as much time to, kind of rehab and get ready. But from a pure spot perspective and line value perspective, I really think there's a lot in the Chargers here because they're off a blowout loss. Denver's coming in here feeling great off a big win against Indy, which was kind of misleading because there were a lot of Indy mistakes and turnovers in that game. And to put this point spread in context, Phil, earlier this year, they played October 13th in Denver. The Chargers were 3-point road favorites in that game in Denver, and they won 23-16. And keep in mind, the Chargers won that game with Herbert still playing through the ankle at that time, which he's playing through. And yet, as 3-point road favorites in Denver, they beat the Broncos 23-16. Bo Nix struggled throughout that game against Jim Harbaugh's defense. And now you turn around for the rematch here. Chargers were laying 3 on the road at Denver, and here they are only laying 2.5 at home. in the rematch against Denver. So that's why I think there's line value here with the Chargers, and we get them in a maximum focus, maximum intensity spot off a blowout loss to the Bucs. So I'm leaning Chargers here at less than a field goal in this game. Yes, it's tough to step in front of Denver. 5 straight point spread covers, 4 straight wins, but you peel back the layers of the onion a little bit. They've faced Atlanta. Kirk Cousins stinks. That's why he's not playing this Sunday. He's been awful the last few weeks. Las Vegas with no quarterback that we trust. Cleveland, which isn't a great team. Indianapolis, probably the best of the bunch, and they're a mediocre team at best. So they've been feasting on a little bit of a lighter schedule and weaker opponents lately, the Denver Broncos. I think they're going to face an angry Chargers team, and even though I've backed Denver a lot lately, I don't know if this is the week I want to be on them. Phil, what do you think here for Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, I completely agree. The Chargers were embarrassed last week. I'm not gonna, lay any merit of that of last week into this. More so than anything, I agree with you. I think they're gonna come out and be really pissed off about what happened last week. They're a prideful group, like you said. These are both defensive squads to me. So I think this under, I really like this under actually. I think this is a little high on the total. But I completely agree. Chargers at home, -2.5 off of a bad loss. And the way that the Broncos looked last week, I mean, I think this one's a pretty simple one, honestly. I like where your head's at with this one.
Denver 8-2 to the over, but you're right. It kind of feels like this is one of those classic, late season divisional matchup. Yeah. Big playoff implications too.
Right. And that was the other point I was going to make. Towards the end of the season, everyone has seen most of the things that they're going to see on film. So I like kind of more defensive battles, especially coming off a short week. Not a lot of time to prepare for the offense. I think this is going to be a defensive battle.
And more so, especially in division games and especially rematches too, where the teams and the coaches know each other well. Yeah, I could see that. I was totally neutral when it comes to this total. I didn't really love over or under in this game, but I see the thinking, and the reasoning for sure behind maybe liking this game under the total on Thursday night. But like I said, look, it's not. I've been on Denver a lot. I just don't feel like this is the right maybe time or the right spot or the right price, honestly, to back them. And they've been awesome as a favorite. But as an underdog, it's been a little more spotty. They were a dog against the Chargers at home. They lost. They were a 9-point dog at Baltimore. They lost by 31. They did cover as a dog at Kansas City, but even in that game, the offense kind of bogged down for the Broncos in that game. So, we'll see how this one goes. But I just feel like situationally and from a spot perspective and really from a line value standpoint compared to the first meeting, there is some line value on the Chargers. All right, we move to Saturday, the first of 2 Saturday games. Houston and Kansas City. What a day we've got Saturday. I know Philip's a married man with a young little girl too, but that might be the day to say, you know what? See you later. We got too much football going on.
This weekend's all about football for me.
Because we got 2 NFL games on Saturday, and they're pretty good games. And we have 3 college football playoff games on Saturday as well. So that's just a park your ass in front of the television set kind of day.
Oh, yeah.
Some of my favorite days. We've got Kansas City 3-point home favorites, 42 the total. Sounds like Patrick Mahomes is going to play, or at least try to play. We know he had the injury late in the Cleveland game last week. It does sound like he is going to obviously try to play through it here in this game with the high ankle sprain. Mahomes, looked like he was going to be limited in practice this week, but I think don't read into that like he's not going to play. I think until they officially clinch the number 1 seed, he'll do everything in his power to play. And the fact that this line has moved here in the last 12 hours, because look, Kansas City dropped to pick them, and now they're back up to -3 the last 24 hours because the betting markets seem to believe Pat's playing here in this game. And I do expect him to play. Now, how healthy will he be? How 100 or will he be close to 100% is a different question, but I do think he'll end up playing. It's going to be interesting here how it goes. They have struggled against the run. Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt have started to form a nice little duo there, and it'll be interesting to see if they can have success here because suddenly Houston has had a little bit more of an issue stopping the run in recent games. We mentioned last week with Houston against Miami that I thought it was a good spot for them. Coming off the bye week, they got the job done with the win against the Dolphins, yet the offense still remains a work in progress. For CJ Stroud, like they didn't move the ball up and down against a Dolphins defense that had been struggling. I think
131 yards passing.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that was still not a great performance against. We talked about it, a defense that was getting ripped the last few games. Miami going into that Houston game. And the Texans still struggled to really put a ton of points on the board. And let's be honest, the points they got, a lot of them were gift wrapped by Miami turnovers from Tua. So moving the ball, matriculating it down the field, was still an issue for Houston in that game. And it looks like still you get Houston in 3rd and long, they're going to struggle. It'll be interesting to see if they can contain Joe Mixon, because if you can, all of a sudden, other than Nico Collins too, I'm not seeing a whole lot of chemistry with Stroud and these other receivers. What's happened with Tank Dell all of a sudden? He's kind of dropped off the face of the earth all of a sudden of late. So there's a little bit of issues right now. Yes, Nico Collins will be able to make some plays, but at the same point in time, it's a Houston offense, still a work in progress. Then you factor in that, you wonder if Mahomes is going to be 100% healthy. And it's not a shock this total's dropped 44.5 down to 42. Not to mention, and I should point this out for these games and when Phil joins me Thursday for the college football playoff preview show, a lot of weather situations this weekend.
Yeah.
For these outdoor stadiums, especially in the Northeast and the Midwest, where it could be cold temperatures, maybe some wind. So that could factor into some of these games throughout the course of the weekend. But totals dropped. It's hard to argue with that. From a side perspective, this actually, if I've seen Mahomes too, when he's not been 100%, still try to run around, still make plays, still be solid. After weeks and weeks and weeks of being scared shitless to bet on Kansas City because they were winning games but not covering, they finally did last week against Cleveland. And I just feel with Houston on the road here, with what I continue to see from the offense, I have a hard time trusting them because they're in a price range, Phil. They got to not just cover, they got to probably win the game to cash a ticket here, only getting 3 on the road. So I actually lean at, as long as it doesn't get above 3, I wouldn't want to lay more than 3 with this Chiefs team. No way. But at 3 or better, I would lean to the Chiefs for the first time in a long time in this game. What do you think here, Phil? Houston, Kansas City.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of this is obviously determined based on Patrick Mahomes, if he's going to play and how healthy he is. I do think, I just looked up the weather and, obviously we're a ways out from Saturday, but it's supposed to be 35 degrees and like 8 mile-per-hour winds. So nothing too crazy in Kansas City for Saturday as of now, but you know what? I think both these teams, offensively, Joe Mixon had 23 yards last week. So that was kind of a surprise. Unusual for him, especially the way they feed him. That was 23 yards on 12 carries too. You know what? I agree here. I think the Chiefs, they're going to have their, the pedal to the metal here. They want that 1 seed. It'll just be really interesting to see Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not sure at this point in time, sitting here on Wednesday, what I would do in terms of a bet. But as the week plays out, we'll see how healthy he is, if he's practicing, all that stuff. But I agree for the most part with you here. Chiefs -3. I anticipate them to win this game, especially at home.
All right, the other game on Saturday is Pittsburgh and Baltimore, divisional matchup and a rematch of earlier this year when Baltimore lost in Pittsburgh, and it was one of those games where they just couldn't get out of their own way. It's not like the Steelers and Russell Wilson with those fucking moon balls went up and down the field against Baltimore, but I remember that game. Baltimore they couldn't get out of their own way. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense didn't have one of their better games. They'll look for redemption here on Saturday in Baltimore. Ravens 6-point home favorites, 45 the total in this game. We got major concerns on the Pittsburgh side from an injury standpoint, and I recommended Pittsburgh on this show last week simply because Mike Tomlin as an underdog has been so good in that game against Philadelphia last week. But I admitted on the show, Phil, when we were on, that I was concerned about no George Pickens, and it did make a difference. Like, they did not have the explosiveness and the vertical passing game, which they did have at least when he was on the field between him and Russell Wilson. And that's no disrespect to Calvin Austin, who's actually done a decent job trying to step up, but they're thin at that position. And when you take out a George Pickens, it's going to be a massive drop-off, and it's going to hurt your passing game. And we saw that last week for the Steelers in that loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. And to make matters worse now, going into this game, it looks like Patrick Queen, the former Raven, who's now with the Steelers at linebacker, he's injured. He's questionable for this game. Montravius Adams, defensive tackle, knee injury. Larry Ogunjobi missed last week with a groin injury. He may not return. Cam Hayward's banged up. And then the big one, of course, is TJ Watt. TJ Watt, who, of course, suffered an injury late in that Philly game. And if you're down him, obviously that's a massive, massive loss because of the impact he makes on defense. And then you factor in, here's Baltimore chomping at the bit to get another piece of Pittsburgh, after losing in Pittsburgh to the Steelers earlier this year. And even though, I always bang the drum and state the case almost all the time when I see Pittsburgh catching points as an underdog, I don't know if I can do it this week. There's just a lot of injuries. If they don't have Pickens, if Hayward's not 100%, and if they don't have TJ Watt, if they don't have their best receiver and offensive player by far, and they don't have their best defensive player in TJ Watt by far, I've got concerns. And we saw them against a really good team last week in Philadelphia, and it was lucky for Pittsburgh that the score wasn't worse. No. Because when I watched that game, the only thing they did on offense with Russell Wilson was they feasted on some mistakes from Philadelphia. When you were asking the Pittsburgh Steelers to go up and down the field and move the football against that Eagles defense, they couldn't do it. They only scored 13 points. And meanwhile, their defense, which people loved early in the season and raved about, we're starting to see some holes. They're not that same defense right now. You can move the ball against them. You can run against them. You can throw the ball against them. I think other than Joey Porter Jr. And maybe Minka in the safety spot, no one else scares you, in that secondary. And we saw Jalen Hurts throw for 290 against this Pittsburgh secondary last week. 110 receiving yards for A.J. Brown, 109 for Devontae Smith. That's never a good thing for a pass defense when you're giving up not one but two 100 receiving yards games to two different receivers. And Pittsburgh allowed that last week to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I actually lean Baltimore here, but what I like more than anything is I think I might, as long as the weather, now keep an eye on this, it's going to be cold everywhere in the Eastern time zone this weekend. It's going to be very cold, but as long as it's not windy, I think Baltimore puts up points. That team total for the Ravens at 26.5, I think that maybe goes over, and I feel better about that than the full game over. We've talked about Baltimore overs on this show pretty much all season, but I have concerns that if Pickens doesn't play, Phil, is Pittsburgh going to carry their end of the bargain offensively for the full game over? Because that's going to hurt their passing game. It's going to be tougher to run the football with Najee Harris, and he had a terrible fumble, which really, really turned that game last week against Philadelphia. But because Baltimore's defensive strength is stopping the run. So if they can't run with Harris and the passing game suffers with Pickens out again, how are they going to move the football is the question. And then this Pittsburgh defense is regressing, and you start to dig in here. I'll give you the numbers recently, Phil. Pittsburgh against Philly, good offense, gave up 27. Against Cincinnati, a good offense, they gave up 38 to the Bengals. Against Washington, pretty good offense, they gave up 27. So against the better teams and the better offenses, hasn't been the same Pittsburgh defense, and they've given up at least 27 points in all of those games. So that's why I think at 26.5, that team total for the Ravens over is of interest to me in this game. Phil, what do you think here, Steelers, Ravens?
Yeah, ever since the 40-point game versus the Bengals, the Steelers, the passing offense hasn't been there, and George Pickens is a huge reason for that, A. B, if they're going to be missing all these guys on defense, once again, red flags everywhere here. Normally, I wouldn't, I would not want to be given, the Ravens 6 points versus a divisional opponent second time playing here. And who knows, maybe there will be a little bit of Tomlin magic here, but I don't think with all those injuries, if and once again, we'll reevaluate as the week goes on. But given the way it is right now, I love the idea of the Ravens over. Especially with all those injuries. I don't anticipate the Steelers offense to move the ball the way that they need to versus this offense, especially if Pickens is out. And then also the Steelers play some of the highest man-to-man coverage in the league, so expect Lamar to get loose on a few runs here. Once again, just like with the Josh Allen discussion we just talked about, when defenses play man-to-man versus running quarterbacks, they lose eyes on the quarterback. And so, if that's the case here with the Steelers, expect Lamar to get loose here. I like the Ravens -6 here.
And I think it's telling that this number, Phil, is -6 with Baltimore favored. When you look at the head-to-head, Pittsburgh's 8-1 in the last 9 meetings against Baltimore. So the Steelers have owned things, and the only Baltimore win in those 9 games was by 2 points. So you're thinking, how the hell can you lay 6 based on series history? Well, I think they're laying 6 for a reason. This is not a good injury report for Pittsburgh right now. For this game. That concerns me big time. about this matchup. All right, let's move to Sunday. We've got Battle of Ohio, which is, in the past it's meant something. Not this year though. We got the Bengals 7.5-point home favorites, 47 the total. So DTR's at quarterback. Dorian Thompson-Robinson's been announced in for Cleveland. Jameis Winston sent to the bench, and it had to happen. Like, he's been getting progressively worse and more interceptions every week. The Denver game, the Kansas City game last week, and now they're turning DTR. I think they also know we're 3-11. I don't want to say tank on purpose, but it's kind of those vibes for Cleveland right now. We're trying to tank. Like, we couldn't give two shits about winning our remaining games right now, the rest of the regular season. So I think that's playing a role in it. So Thompson Robinson, DTR, showed me a little something in the preseason last year, and he got everyone's attention. Whoa, this guy looks like he might be something. Well, in every regular season I've seen him play since then, he's been terrible. So, and he struggled, and he's had interceptions, and I don't know what's going to change here. That being said, he does face a Cincinnati defense that's utter horseshit this year and hasn't been any good. So maybe this is an opportunity for him to play better than we think. However, I saw a little sign of light, a little beacon of hope for the Bengals defense last week against Tennessee. Now, Tennessee's no great shakes, and Will Levis is a mistake waiting to happen. And we saw that last week. Bonehead decisions again from Levis in that game. But you've got to credit Cincy's defense, a defense that's been much maligned. Lou Anarumo, their DC, has been raked over the coals by the fan base for how horrible the defense has been. But last week, they showed a little something. They got some stops. They finally forced some turnovers for the first time in what felt like a long time. And the one thing we saw from Cincy last week, and even in some of the recent losses, they're not quitting. The effort's still there. And I think Joe Burrow is making sure that this team doesn't mail it in down the stretch. And we've seen that. I just think Cleveland is at the point where going to DTR and seeing the feeble effort they gave last week against Kansas City, and there wasn't much pushback at all when they fell behind. I'm seeing one team still trying with the Bengals and really still playing somewhat competent football, and I don't trust it with Cleveland. You would think on the surface, how can you lay 7.5 with the Bengals? They've been a miserable favorite. Well, they did finally cover last week against Tennessee. They just might be able to cover again this week, against a Cleveland team that I don't know if they're bringing much to the table here. They're 0-3 straight up, 0-3 against the spread their last 3 games, and all 3 losses have been by 9 points or more, which would be good enough to cover this number if you're going to lay the points with Cincinnati. So I do lean Cincy. I like Cincy in a teaser leg, especially. Get them down to 1.5 on a 6-point teaser. I do like that. I like a Cincinnati team total in this game too, because I'm still not sure I'm ready to lay the full 7.5 and trust that defense, even against a shaky quarterback and offense with DTR at the helm. But can Cincy score 28 with their team total at 27.5? I think so. You look at Cincy, 37 last week, 27 against Dallas, 38 against Pittsburgh, 27 against a very good Chargers defense, 34 against Baltimore. They're putting up points. Burrow in that offense isn't an issue. That hasn't been an issue all year for them. So I like the team total here for the Bengals more than laying the 7.5, over 27.5 for the Cincy team total. Phil, what do you think here for Browns Bengals?
Yeah, I love the Bengals team total for sure. I mean, they've been hot. They're still in the playoff hunt too. So I think they're playing for something here. So that's for sure.
And they're not totally out of it yet. They're not making it, but they're not mathematically
right. They're not mathematically eliminated. So I think that gives them enough hope to want to play. I love the minus 7.5. I don't see the Browns moving the ball on them, and I see the Bengals moving the ball. So you know what? I feel comfortable laying 7.5 on the Bengals here. I think they're going to win by at least 10. I would say. You nailed DTR on the head here. Preseason hero. Once he gets to the regular season, not much to show for. So you know what? I love the team total for the Bengals. Absolutely, they're going to score. I actually, given the way I'm talking about this game, I could see an under just because I don't think the Browns score that much in this game, to be honest. But the other end of the spectrum here is that there's no recent film on DTR, so who knows? I like the 7.5 and the Bengals team total more so than an under here as well, though. So I'm on the same page as you.
So there's no way I can bet a Cincy game under, but I'd be a little concerned about it this week, betting it over just because
right.
Cleveland
just because of the Browns. Yeah,
exactly. Yet Cleveland's been, I should say Cincinnati rather has been an over machine, incredible 6-1 in their last 7 games to the over. But I don't know if Cleveland's going to do enough to help that.
The Bengals were the other team with the fumble before the end zone. The pick six it was a defensive player in that defense. It wasn't Jonathan freaking Taylor, but still they should have had another touchdown. The Bengals.
Yeah, no doubt. You're right. That's what it was, and that was a mistake too. 100%. I can't believe that keeps happening. It's ridiculous. But on we move. Detroit and Chicago. Lions 6.5-point road favorites, 48 the total. So the defensive injuries are mounting at an alarming rate for the Lions. There's no question about that. And we saw it against Green Bay when they barely escaped. Credit to them, but it was all because of their offense. They really weren't shutting down Jordan Love and the Packers because the Packers scored most of the second half there in that game. And then the Bills did whatever they wanted, almost scored on every possession against this. I mean, it's injuries everywhere. It's it's Alim McNeill out for the season. It's already Anzalone and multiple linebackers out. You're already without Aiden Hutchinson all these weeks. And now secondary too, with Carlton Davis, the veteran who they got from Tampa Bay in the offseason out. It's just upwards of 17 players on the injured list right now for the Detroit Lions on defense. So my first thought coming out of that game is, boy, oh boy, it's going to be tough to back them and especially lay points with them. But then I came across a certain radio interview that took place earlier this week involving Detroit Lions head coach Dan Campbell. And it was so incredible to listen to that I'm going to play it for everyone right now. Here it is. This was from earlier this week. Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Lions.
What happens is, you win 11 in a row, and you lose, and then the sky falls. And I hate to say it, but we're not going to be able to win 11 in a row again for the rest of this season. We're just not going to be able to do it. And, what happens is you get used to eating filet, and I'm talking to all of us, and everything's good. Life's good, but you forgot what it was like when you had nothing and you ate your fucking molded bread, and it was just fine. And it gave you everything you needed. And sometimes you got to get punched in the mouth and remember what it used to be like to really appreciate where you are. And we'll do that. And so we got a bad taste in our mouth. We got kicked around the other day. We lost a few guys. And you know what? It's exactly what we needed. We're going to bounce back. We're going to respond. We got guys that have an unbelievable opportunity here. And we will play the game any way needed to win. We still got a good offense. We got plenty of defensive players. I can go rattle them off right now. We're going to put the best 11 on the field. We're going to freaking cut it loose. We're going to play with our special teams. And I don't give a crap if we got to win by 1 point for the rest of the year. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to be happy about it. We come out of the game with 50 yards of total offense and we win by 1, you're going to see smiles on my face. I promise you. All right. If it's the other way defensively, we give up 700 yards and we win by 1 point, you're going to see a fucking smile from my ear to ear. All right. I can promise you. So we're going to find a way and we're going to get it done.
How about that? Dan Campbell, ladies and gentlemen, responding to the worry and the woe is me that I'm sure is flooding the Detroit Lion fan base right now about how can this potentially Super Bowl bound team survive all these catastrophic injuries, especially on defense. And Dan Campbell with the old rally the troops speech on Detroit radio, his weekly radio hit locally in Detroit there. That alone has got me laying the points here. It's not just that. But here's the thing. I think for one game, after hearing that, and the players are going to hear that too, what their coach said on radio, that's going to inspire everybody. And for 1 week, you find some replacement, your backup linebackers, backup defensive ends, backup defensive tackles to step up for 1 week and get the job done. Now, can these guys play well week in and week out, especially against better teams? This is not the Buffalo Bills this week, by the way. This is the Chicago Bears, who, by the way, are falling apart. That was hideous against Minnesota. They got blown out by San Francisco the week before. And there's Caleb Williams with bad body language, just flapping his gums like a loose cannon on the sideline there with all the struggles. And some of the stuff he did on Monday night against Minnesota was shocking, to see how bad it was. Thomas Brown is Jeff Ulbrich of the NFC. He is in over his head as an interim coach. He's just not cut out for this job. He can't handle it. It's too much for him. And say what you will about Eberflus and the clock management shit. Look at the defense and the fall off in the Bears defense since he's been fired. San Francisco shredded that defense. Minnesota, they couldn't stop them in the second half. good luck with Jared Goff and a pissed off Lions team. And this game means everything to Detroit because now they're in a battle for their lives with Minnesota for first in the NFC North and trying to hang on desperately for the number 1 seed, which means everything. They want to play the NFC Championship game in Ford Field, especially after losing in the NFC Championship game on the road last year. They'd love to get that game at home. This is a huge game. They're not looking past the Bears. They're going to rally around what their head coach said at less than a touchdown, even with all these defensive injuries. And believe me, I'm still concerned about all of them. I'm still taking Detroit and laying the 6.5 here. Phil, what do you think? Lions, Bears?
I agree. It's not a matter of, like he said, I mean, they have replacements, obviously. I mean, we don't have the same guys out there. And you know what? Excuses and explanations are kind of the same thing here. So not going to give the Lions don't want any excuses here. But what I'm trying to say is this is an organizational thing. This is a schematic thing. The Lions are better prepared for this moment than the Bears are. And like you said, the Bears they look in over their heads. They're so unorganized. Their defense is all over the place. They're celebrating when they're down 0-10, mocking the Vikings, the Vikings chant and all that stuff. I mean, that Caleb Williams' body language.
That's loser stuff right there.
Yeah, it's loser stuff right now. And you know what? The only way that the Bears might, being at home and maybe weather helps and the injuries and whatnot. I agree, though. I think the Lions are playing for something much bigger than just this one game here. They're playing for the 1 seed. So Lions minus 6.5 for me all day. And actually, I think oh man, I don't know about this total. What do you think about this total here? It's kind of a tricky one because I want to say easy under, but with the Lions injuries, I don't know.
Think I can with the Lions defensive injuries. And I've been betting the opponent team total over I was on Buffalo team total last week over. I was on Green Bay team total over the week before. Both of them cashed. I can't do it with Chicago this week. And I think for 1 week, even with all the injuries, you're going to get these guys playing their asses off. Right. Campbell lighting a fire under them. And it's like I said, this is not the Packers and the Bills anymore. It's not Jordan Love, and it's not Josh Allen. This is Caleb Williams and a sputtering Bears offense ever since the last couple of weeks, really. They struggled to move the football. So I would look more to Detroit team total over than this game more than Chicago for sure. No question.
Yeah. Okay.
As for the full game total, I still can't bet it under, but I might pump the brakes on the over this week with Detroit because I don't know if Chicago – well, even with a mangled defense, I just get that feeling for 1 week they will show up against, let's be honest, an offense that isn't anything like what they've seen the last 2 weeks. Arizona, Carolina. Cardinals 4.5-point road favorites, 47. I drank the Carolina Kool-Aid. I'll admit it. I said I thought Carolina was going to be a good bet, but we did warn everybody they were favored for the first time all season. And they weren't ready to be favored, clearly. And actually, someone asked CeeDee Lamb, what did you think? And they said, we noted that we were not favored, that they were. And we wanted to prove them wrong. So Dallas knew what the point spread was, apparently, that they were an underdog to Carolina, and they didn't take too kindly to it. So now they're back in the underdog role, though. So that's where Carolina had covered 5 in a row before the loss last week against Dallas. That being said, Arizona is starting to become a pattern team. Against a good team and a good defense, Kyler Murray and the offense doesn't work, and it struggles. But you get them against a weak team and a weak defense and a lesser team, they do move the football, and they have success, like last week against New England. Arizona and Kyler Murray went up and down the field against that Patriots defense. I kind of feel they can do that here. This would be some kind of lean to over. Minus 4.5 Arizona, I lean, but I think the team total for Arizona of 24.5, I lean to that even more. The question is, what does Bryce Young do? Because he was playing better until last week, and then it was Bryce Young of the early season again last week. Interceptions, indecisive, struggles, holding on to the ball too long, just the gamut of problems again for Bryce Young. Arizona can't afford to lose this. Like, they need to win every game remaining their hopes of hanging in it are thin behind the Rams and the Seahawks in that NFC West. But they have to win this game to have any chance. And I don't trust Carolina enough. So I lean Arizona, probably either team total over or the minus 4.5. Phil, what do you think here? Cardinals, Panthers.
Yeah, I agree with you here on this one. Cardinals are in a must-win situation here. Panthers aren't playing for much. Cardinals, need to win here. I fully anticipate the Cardinals to be able to win here by more than 4.5. So It'll be an interesting one though, because I think the Panthers are gritty. They are a gritty team, but last week they didn't look very good, especially defensively. Boy, they were letting up a lot of things, and I think the Cardinals it's going to be an offensive bounce back game for the Cardinals, getting back on track here. So, you know what? I do actually think that I could see an over hitting here, 47. But I'd be curious to see what the Cardinals team total over is too. I kind of like that trend you got going now with these team total overs.
Yeah, it's good. It's often what I like to do, Phil, with favorites.
Yeah.
I always feel like I'd rather lay the points. I'll put a perfect example. This is college football. This was a bowl game that took place last night, the Frisco Bowl. Memphis, you could have laid 5.5 with them. They won by 5, but you also could have taken their team total over, which was 30.5, and they scored 42. The team total cashed easily, and there you are sweating your ass off over the -5.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So that's exactly why, because sometimes with these favorites, the defense, I don't always trust them.
Right.
New England and Buffalo, we've got the Bills 14-point home favorites, 46 the total in this game. So the only concern I would have for Buffalo is you're off the Rams game, which was a barn burner down to the wire. Mm-hmm. They lost. Detroit, a heavily hyped Super Bowl preview, back and forth. Maybe you're flat, but if you're not flat, you're going to score at will against New England's defense here. And as I mentioned with the Bills team total over last week, they have scored 30 points or more in 8 straight games, I believe it is now, after that win against Detroit last week. And I don't know if I totally buy in to the flat spot. They're at home. The home fans always get them going. I don't think they're going to get the number 1 seed. They need Kansas City to face plant for that to happen. But they're still playing for the number 2 seed to at least make sure you get a divisional playoff game at home. And you look at them. Yes, it's now 8 straight games with at least 30 points for the Buffalo Bills. Their team total's 30.5. I feel pretty good about playing that again. And that's probably what I'll do with this game. If anything, Buffalo team total over 30.5 against New England. Drake May has shown some glimpses. It's kind of up and down, inconsistency, but there's been a little bit of punch in that Patriots offense, at least with him. If the weather, again, this is going to be cold weather Sunday in Buffalo, maybe a chance of snow. But if the weather's not going to be too bad, check back closer to kickoff. But maybe that over 46 could be worth a look here in this game as well. Phil, what do you think? Patriots, Bills.
You know what? I'm going to go against you here on this one. I have a weird feeling. I think, the second matchup of the season, like you said, the Bills with just these 2 weeks in a row.
Barn burners, they were.
Barn burners, just a lot of emotion and all this stuff here. I think the Bills win, but I think the Patriots, I think they'll keep it within 14, to be honest. Just divisional opponent. Bad weather game. So I actually do like the Patriots. And like you said, Drake May has been showing glimpses here. He doesn't turn the ball over as much, as you'd think a rookie would. He's been progressing throughout the year as well. So I think the Patriots are going to surprise some people here and keep this within 14. So this is kind of my one little risky one that I'm going with.
Well, I'll tell you what, long-term divisional dogs, especially double-digit divisional underdogs, have been very good. Like we're talking over the course of 20 years. Right. If you take divisional underdogs, especially double-digit dogs, more often than not, you're going to win.
Yeah.
It's not always going to work, but that's not the best. That's not always the worst tactic in the world to take a double-digit division dog, which in this case here is New England. All right, Philadelphia and Washington. We got the Eagles 3.5-point road favorites, 45.5 the total. This is revenge for Washington because they lost in Philly on a Thursday night earlier this year. I don't know if I want to step in front of the Eagles, though. Like, I don't even think the Eagles played crisp and clean, and yet they still, ran away with it against Pittsburgh last week. And what concerns me is near the bottom of the NFL is Washington against the run defensively. And a lot of Saquon Barkley, who's still in the running for the MVP. So I think they're going to want to feed him the ball, especially when it's an advantageous matchup against Washington's struggling run defense. So can they stop Saquon Barkley? I'm not sure. As much as, and I like Jaden Daniels and company, but they've leveled off at least a little bit here on offense the last few weeks. It's one of these deals again with Cliff Kingsbury offense, right? Kind of in Arizona, they always criticize Cliff Kingsbury, Phil. Once we get to December, the offense stops working. It's not the same. It's almost like teams figure it out. Is that happening again? Deja vu with him here in Washington? Because, the Washington offense hasn't been nearly as good here. The 18 that they scored against Philly, it's a misleading 26 points against Dallas because a lot of that was special team stuff. They did have the big game against Tennessee, But then last week, like, they really had a hard time getting going and finishing drives against New Orleans and only 20 points. So that does concern me. I don't want to step in front of Philly. It doesn't mean I'm taking the Eagles, but it's enough probably to keep me off Washington here. What do you think here, Phil? Eagles, Commanders.
Yeah, I agree here. This might be, I'm not sure if you could do this here, but Eagles teaser, even if you want to, try to tease that down. But, I agree with you that the Commanders' offense has been stalling. The Eagles have the best defense in the league right now, arguably, over the last few weeks. That Saints game, I mean, I think a lot of people are figuring Jaden Daniels out and Cliff Kingsbury, like you said. I would lean Eagles -3.5 here all day long. Not sure about this total, just given the fact that, I think this is going to be a ground game and we're on the East Coast. So weather, monitor the weather here. But I also would kind of lean more towards an under here as well with the Eagles. I anticipate the Eagles to give the Commanders not many opportunities to score here. And like you said, feed the ball to Saquon, bleed out the clock.
Yeah. And by the way, 3.9 yards per carry for Brian Robinson for Washington in the first matchup against Philly. Not very good. And they're good against mobile quarterbacks, and their secondary's been good lately too. So can they lock up McLaurin, who by far is the best receiver that Washington has? So where's the pathways for offensive success for Washington?
Right. And the other thing to note about the Commanders' defense is they do mix up their coverage a little bit here too. So, I mean, they're not going to be giving, Jalen Hurts just the man-to-man that he saw last week versus the Steelers. So I think that's another thing. And Jalen Hurts has he's struggled against zone coverage the last few weeks and historically actually in his career. So keep that in mind as well.
All right, New York Giants, Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta, 8.5-point home favorites, 42 the total. The headline story, Kirk Cousins sent to the bench at long last. Raheem Morris should have done this probably even last week or 2 weeks ago, but it had to happen after that Raiders game. That was rock bottom. I couldn't believe what I was seeing from Kirk Cousins. Almost like they were scared to throw the football. They were scared to throw the football with him in the second half of that game. He has 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions, I believe, the last 4 or 5 games. It had to happen. He's a nice guy. You can tell he's a great guy. And that's not the issue with him. The issue is his play on the field. It hasn't been any good. And look, I'm not saying Michael Penix Jr., who had a great college run at Washington, is going to be the answer, but you at least got to see it can't be worse after what we've seen from Kirk Cousins. Let's see what he's got. And the good news is, the one thing about putting him in this week, you get a Giants team that looks like they've quit, that they've waved the white flag, that they just want this season over with. There's no pushback in them whatsoever. Baltimore destroys them 35-14 last week. And then DeVito ends up getting injured in that game for the Giants, and they have to go to Tim Boyle at quarterback. So who the hell knows who's going to be at quarterback here? Is Drew Lock going to be able to play? Is DeVito going to be healthy? And do you have to go to Tim Boyle again, who is a journeyman who's not that good? This is one spot where I'm looking at Atlanta minus the 8.5, maybe Atlanta first half, but Atlanta, I could not recommend to anyone to take the Giants right now. So I would consider laying it because look, Atlanta, this actually could be an upgrade because Kirk Cousins was keeping this team down that badly the last few games with his performance. So for me, it's only either laying the points with Atlanta or taking their team total over 25.5. That might be a good approach because you look at this Giants team, 35 allowed to Baltimore, 27 to Dallas, 30 to Tampa. They could maybe give up 26 plus to this Falcons team if Penix gives them the pop that I think he could at quarterback. What do you think here, Phil? Giants, Falcons.
You know what? I think that this is going to be an instance where he will give them, a big upgrade here. And, especially when, there's not a lot of film on him, obviously, at all during the regular season. He only played 1 game in the preseason. He's seen Kirk prepare. He's seen how things work in the NFL for a few weeks. He's got weapons. So, especially after the way that the Falcons, were still able to, pull off a win, not, saying much against the Raiders last week, but I think that he's going to give them a pop here. I would lay the 8.5. Giants quit, and I would probably go Falcons team total, especially if it's 26 here. Not sure about this total, especially given the fact we have no clue who's going to be playing quarterback for the Giants. So,
I mean, you throw Michael Penix against Philadelphia for his first start, I wouldn't want any part of betting him.
Exactly. No. And I think that's a thought process here. This is like a preseason game for him,
It's a miserable team that's quitting every single week. No defense to speak of. Yeah. And use Bijan Robinson, please. The Giants stink against the run. Terrible.
Exactly. That's what's going to happen too.
Yeah. Use Bijan Robinson. Help him out. Help out your young quarterback. Take some pressure off him. All right. Tennessee and Indy. Indianapolis, 3.5-point home favorites, 42.5 the total. I thought that was a season crusher for them losing to Denver. I don't see Indy going into the playoffs now. They're not catching Houston, obviously, for the division now either because Houston's clinched that.
They're out.
I'm not laying 3.5 in this spot with Richardson and the Colts. It's a question of do you take Tennessee? And it's not easy to take Tennessee because you look at the situation for them, and obviously they're not getting adequate enough quarterback play from Will Levis right now, who got benched, and they went back to Mason Rudolph last week against the Bengals after a horrible, 8 for 12 and 3 interceptions for Levis in the first half. So who's going to be at quarterback? We'll have to see. But they've lost confidence in Will Levis. Will Levis, I think we're almost at that point where I'm ready to say, hey, it's not going to be for him as a number one quarterback in the NFL. I'd still lean Titans. I'm not laying 3.5 with Indy after probably a season-ending loss for them last week against Denver, littered with mistakes, and dumbass Jonathan Taylor dropping that ball before the goal line. What do you think here, Phil? Titans, Colts.
Yeah, I don't love this game here. Just, two teams that that are so volatile. They're all over the place. Mason Rudolph is playing for the Titans, right? Is that confirmed?
I would think so. I just don't know if it's been confirmed yet.
I believe he is. Colts are all over the place here. The Colts defense has been.
It is Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, Mason Rudolph playing here. This game is a pass for me. If you held a gun to my head, I probably would.
I'd probably lean over now. It's an upgrade, I think, to Rudolph. And the Colts defense is starting to collapse. And Titans defense looks like they're running out of gas too, because the Bengals just shredded them, lit them up.
Right, exactly. And and the other thing too, I just know this from my fantasy team, but Calvin Ridley has been absolutely shut out against the Colts here, and also the Colts have a pretty good defense versus the pass game here. So, you know what, I would probably lean Titans plus 3.5 here. Don't want to mess anything up, mess with the Colts at all here. I don't even know about this total here. This game's just a total pass for me.
All right, next up, we've got the LA Rams and the New York Jets. Rams 3-point road favorites, 46.5 the total in this game. Of course, the Rams, by virtue of what they've done here the last couple of weeks with wins against the Bills and then that ugly win, but a win nevertheless against the 49ers last Thursday night in that ugly game. Now they're right there in the mix again, tied with Seattle for first in the NFC West. So it's going to come down to the wire, probably down to I know the Cardinals are still alive, but they got to win out and they need help. It's probably going to be Rams or Seahawks for the division. So this is huge for the Rams. They have a chance maybe because Seattle's got a tough game with Minnesota, which we'll get to in a moment. There's a chance for the Rams to maybe get first place. But I'll say this about the Jets. They won last week against Jacksonville. Their offense is humming right now, believe it or not. Aaron Rodgers and the offense isn't the issue. They're scoring points. They're moving the ball. He had 289 through the air. I even saw him run effectively against Jacksonville last week. 45 rushing yards for Aaron Rodgers. Devontae went off, 198 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson had a receiving touchdown too. They can move the ball, the Jets. The problem is, we've talked about this week after week, Phil, you and I, with the Jets. Their defense is awful. It's terrible. Mac Jones is going up and down the field last week against this Jets defense. What an absolute disappointment considering the collection of talent that defense was supposed to have, the New York Jets. And they continue to give up points, give up big plays week in and week out. Mac Jones throws for almost 300 yards against them in that game. And by the way, Mac Jones, what are you, some kind of moron, some kind of idiot down the sideline pointing first down and doing the old like that? You're only in because Lawrence is hurt. You're on a losing team, and you're going to showboat and do all that crap. You're at a dismal season. Come on. It's ridiculous at that point what I see from some. This is definitely old man yelling at clouds. I get it, but it's definitely silly to see some of that. So I got a funny feeling the Jets are going to want to play spoiler here, and their offense has certainly played well enough. Problem is their defense hasn't. I love this over. I really, as long as the weather's not going to be too cold or too windy here at MetLife Stadium on Sunday, I think this game goes over the total. I think the Rams move the ball at will with Stafford, Nakua, and Kupp and Williams on the ground against this horrible Jets defense, which is totally underachieved. but the Jets offense is moving the ball week in and week out. And I think the offense might move it here. And I think they'll want to play spoiler. I'm not going against the Rams, and I lean Rams, but something about it that's in the pit of my stomach that I'm worried about. Jets are going to try to show up and play spoiler. I definitely like the over 46.5 even more. What do you think here, Phil? Rams, Jets?
I agree, and it's actually funny you say that about that gut feeling, because I kind of have the same feeling here as well. I think the Jets,
west to east travel as well. Yep.
They're traveling. I just looked up the weather. It's supposed to be kind of late high 20s, early 30s, low 30s. So we'll see what the weather is, but I agree. I love this over here. I think that the Jets defense just hasn't shown up all year. Jets offense is now here, and I think that now that they're eliminated and a lot of the pressure has been lifted off them, I actually think the offense is starting to play a little bit better here. So love this over. You know what, and I something, and I've been burned too many times this year with the Jets, but something's telling me something, is in the air with this +3 with the Jets here. But you know what? I've been burned one too many times. So, I don't know if I want the Rams to have -3 either, but I'd maybe go Rams money line or Jets +3.
All right, Minnesota, Seattle, definitely a great game in the late afternoon window on Sunday. Vikings 3-point road favorites, 43.5 the total. Look, Seattle was rolling, but then they met the Jordan Love Green Bay Packer Express, and that was impressive by Green Bay. No question. It was not good from Seattle. And we talked about how good the defense was playing, and they got shredded by the Packers. Talked about how good Geno and the offense was starting to play in the run game, and they couldn't get much going against the Packers. But I don't want to be that guy that sees Seattle play that badly last Sunday night against the Packers at home and now fades them this week, because this is an even bigger game now. They've got to try to respond. They're catching 3 at home. Problem is, I keep saying this, Seattle's been better on the road than they've been at home, believe it or not.
Yeah.
There's all the talk about the 12th man and Lumen Field in Seattle, and they haven't been great at home. And if I'm going to fade Minnesota, I'm going to need more points than this. It feels like Minnesota just finds a way to win, and I could see them winning by 3, by 2, by 4, which would cover. I could see them winning a close one. It's a tough game for me. It is. But I wouldn't be running to bet Minnesota on the road, traveling out west. I don't think they played great against Chicago either. I think Darnold and the offense took a little bit of a step back. They're going to have to play better here if they're going to go to Seattle against an angry team off a loss and get the win. What do you think here, Phil? Vikings, Seahawks.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that that point that you made, that the Vikings didn't play well and they still won by that much, granted it is the Bears. I think that, they're going to be a team that's motivated to clean things up before the playoffs. And is Geno Smith playing? Do we know anything about that?
That's true. I should point out with Geno obviously getting banged out, and that's the problem too. You're right. I've totally
if Sam Howell's playing, absolutely not. I mean, I'm playing.
No, you're right. It looks like Coach McDonald says Geno Smith will practice for the Vikings game today.
Okay.
So all right. Like they'll announce Geno's status. Apparently, it'll be known later in the week. But he has not been ruled out, and he's going to try to practice. So it's not for sure that if it's Sam Howell, you got to run for the heavens.
Yeah, exactly.
After what I saw,
I'm still leaning -3 here, Vikings, and I actually like this over as well. I think that the Vikings are going to move the ball, especially on the ground. And if Geno's playing, I think that they put up points. I could see this being like a 27-20 type game. So I'd lay the points for the Vikings here.
And all the under money that came in, because this opened 45 down to 43.5. That was all assuming that maybe Sam Howell would play and Geno would be out, but that's not for sure yet. Geno still might play here in this game. All right, San Francisco, Miami. It feels like both of these teams, their losses last week ended their playoff hopes. So this is a dicey handicap here. Miami 1-point home favorites, 44.5 the total. Put it this way, Miami at home, San Francisco traveling west to east. There's no friggin' way I'm betting San Francisco. We saw it last week. That was a season-ending loss. They're done now. Stick a fork in them. For all these years, they've been Super Bowl contenders. Now they're out. Who knows if we're going to see them play hard down the stretch. And you see Devondre Campbell just fuck off, take off, and go right to the locker room. That's bad vibes right there. Now you're traveling to Miami. Your season's come to an end. It's Miami or pass, but I got to admit, I'm not rushing to take the Dolphins here in this spot either. After that loss to Houston, probably ended their playoff hopes. So it's probably going to be a pass for me. Phil, what do you think here? 49ers, Dolphins.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I I think that the one thought I have in my head about this is going to be mid 70s, Miami. That's where they play well. They're coming off a loss. So, I anticipate the Miami Dolphins offense to get their head out of their ass a little bit here and try to play some.
Maybe team total, you thinking?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, what is it? Do you know what it is?
21.5.
Yeah. See, I could see that. Although the 49ers have been good against the pass defense. Jalen Waddle might not be playing, is what I'm hearing. So,
he got injured last week. Yep.
We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think that this 49ers team is beat, and you know what? It almost appears to me like they're kind of like sore losers here because they're used to either being in the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game every single year, and now they're not. And so it kind of looks like this team's laying down a little bit. Brock Purdy has some heat on him. Deebo Samuel, man, he's just not the same this year. I think this 49ers team is kind of laying down a little bit here. So I would lean Dolphins -1. But I would say an over, though. I feel pretty good about an over here.
All right, Jacksonville, Las Vegas. We've got the Raiders, 1-point home favorites, 40 the total. Usually when I lose a bet, I say, you know what? I thought I still made a good I had the right thinking, the right process, but it just lost. I can't say that about the Las Vegas team total over bet, Phil, that I lost on Monday night. I regret it big time, and I think, God, how silly to me to trust Desmond Ridder to do anything. The only reason I took it was because, look, as bad as Desmond Ridder is, he can't play at the NFL level. He just can't.
Yeah.
You're going against the team that booted you, that got rid of you. Atlanta's defense has been terrible week in and week out recent weeks. That even I thought Ridder in that spot with the motivation could do something, and he couldn't do anything. Couldn't move the football. So I felt bad deciding to bet that when it was all said and done. The good news is, well, I guess, I don't know if it's good news. Las Vegas should be losing or trying to. But Aiden O'Connell's practicing in full, and it sounds like Antonio Pierce wants to start him. So it sounds like O'Connell might be back. And say what you will about O'Connell. He's a huge upgrade. Anybody's a huge upgrade. Philip Nelson, Ian Cameron are a huge upgrade from Desmond Ridder right now at the quarterback spot. So when I look at this situation for Las Vegas, O'Connell's an upgrade. I lean over now at 40 because, look, Mac Jones and the Jags offense did move the ball for a decent amount against the Jets. The defense didn't stop the Jets, so I worry about that Jags defense. Indoors in Las Vegas, over for me. If it was Ridder again, Phil, I would have taken Jacksonville +1. But maybe he's pumping the brakes on that with O'Connell back. What do you think here, Phil? Jags, Raiders.
I agree. I didn't know O'Connell was practicing. So if that's the case, I would go over here because, Mac Jones has actually found a little bit of he found a weapon last week in Brenton Strange, the tight end, filling in for Evan Ingram. I think he had like 11 catches, 12 targets or something like that. And, Mac Jones is Mac Jones, but, I think
Brian Thomas was good too.
Brian Thomas. I mean, there's been some upgrades over the last few weeks here from them. So with this Raiders defense, I mean, I could see, this going over 40, especially with O'Connell playing. So if O'Connell plays, -1 Raiders and an over here for me.
All right, we're down to our 2 primetime games. We got Sunday Night Football, Tampa Bay, Dallas. Tampa Bay 4-point road favorites, 48.5 the total in this game. Now, look, Dallas, credit to them. They weren't happy that, they were underdogs to Carolina, and they played a solid game. Cooper Rush was all right. The defense forced a lot of turnovers, though. Let's be honest. That's what won them the game. It's not like Dallas's defense stopped Carolina from moving the ball throughout the game, but they feasted on just turnover after turnover, and that really helped them in that 30-14 win because at the end of the day, they only outgained Carolina by like a 70-yard margin, even though it was 30-14. But now you're playing a Tampa team that's 4-0 in their last 4 games, 5-1 against the spread their last 6. And Baker Mayfield's playing at a high level. Look at the difference with Mike Evans back. And all of a sudden, the passing game's working. Bucky Irving and Rashad White are running the ball, which they should be able to do against this miserable Dallas run defense. I know Rico Dowdle has suddenly given Dallas a little bit of a run game. I don't know if that's going to work here against Tampa because, the run defense for them can be capable. To me, this is now Dallas. You're not playing Carolina anymore. Okay, you're playing Tampa Bay. We continue to see Dallas struggle at home. They lost to the Bengals by 7. If you can lose to the Bengals at home by 7, the last home game for the Cowboys, you can lose by more than 4 to Tampa, the way Tampa's going. And Tampa can't screw around. They're still battling with Atlanta for first in the NFC South. And it's important to stay ahead of Atlanta, Phil, for Tampa Bay, because if they're tied in record, Atlanta gets the tiebreaker for beating Tampa twice this year, head to head. So very important game for the Bucs. Price is cheap enough. Give me Tampa Bay here, -4. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you here. Baker's hot. You know, the Cowboys, they're just still all over the place. You said it already. The Buccaneers are 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 games. The Cowboys are 4-9 against the spread in their last 13 games. But the over has hit 8-3 in the Buccaneers' last 11 games. So I could see this over potentially being there, especially with the Buccaneers defense. I think that was a little bit of a fluky game with the Chargers last week.
Well, they weren't stopping them in the first half, and then Herbert aggravated his ankle a little bit, and then that's when things changed. Yep.
So I'm leaning Buccaneers -4 here and an over as well, actually.
And I like Tampa team total. Throw that in there as well. Over 25.5 as well. All right, Monday Night Football. Your Packers on Monday Night Football, Phil, against the New Orleans Saints. We've got Green Bay 14-point home favorites at Lambeau on Monday night next week. The total sitting at 42.5 across the board. I mean, when you look at the Saints, credit to them. They hung in there against Washington, last week. It wasn't pretty, and they got a backdoor cover, losing, of course, 20-19. But still, this offense last week with Jake Haener was terrible. I will say this. They went to Spencer Rattler. He played a lot better, but Spencer Rattler at home against Washington. Now you got to go on the road to face Green Bay, a Green Bay defense that's starting to play a little bit better. And it looks like Rattler is going to be the starter for the rest of the season here for the Saints with Carr out. And obviously Jake Haener wasn't very good at all. It sounds like Darren Rizzi's going to let Spencer Rattler start at least this week, if not the rest of the year for the Saints. I don't know if it's going to matter. It's a lot of points, though, to lay with Green Bay. You know what I mean? You're coming off that big win in Seattle. You're happy winning this game if you're Green Bay. You don't necessarily have to win by margin. I mean, could you talk me into an over 27.5 team total with Green Bay? I think I could get there with that. I think they should move the ball against the Saints. I don't think the Saints defense, I trust them to hold up against the better offenses. Denver put 33 on them. Tampa put 51 on them in recent games.
So timeout here. 1 second here. I'm just going to call timeout.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. A severe winter storm warning has been issued starting Thursday, going through Monday. There's a 70% chance of snow, 10-mile-per-hour winds. So this weather could be pretty bad on Monday night. Just a heads up.
I see that, and I'm just looking at on Monday in Green Bay specifically that forecast, and you're saying snow -4 and 10 to 15 mile per hour winds as of now. Yeah, that would change things for me. And again, we don't have to lock in anything right now.
Right.
Because this is still several days out from Monday night. But my first thought was Packers team total. Check the weather, see what it's like. But, the Saints have actually been pretty decent against the point spread since the 3-2, actually, against the spread since Rizzi's been there. And their losses were a 7-point loss to the Rams and a 1-point loss to Washington.
Yeah.
So they're well inside, that's why it's not the easiest decision to lay for. And I'm not laying 14 with Green Bay in this spot, even though I think they're a better team and have a lot to play for, obviously, still, but not at this number. So maybe I like the Packer team total over, but I'm waiting to see what this weather forecast looks like closer to kickoff on Monday night. Phil, what do you think here? Saints, Packers.
What is the Packers team total?
27.5.
27.5. Okay. So more than anything here, 42.5. I would lean towards an under. I don't think the Saints really move the ball here. Spencer Rattler, you say he's playing, Spencer Rattler?
Yep. 30 plus for the Packers in 4 straight games, by the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could see the Packers just running the piss out of the ball here. Just really, ground and pound type game, especially in the snow. Jordan Love is pretty good at actually throwing through the snow. I will say, I've kind of noticed that throughout his career. But the Saints being a dome team, they're out. I don't think they're up for the challenge here. I would probably
and Rattler all those games at Oklahoma and South Carolina where weather is never an issue yet.
I don't feel comfortable laying -14 here, but you know what? I think a total of an under 42.5 here, but. The only bet I'd place here would be Packers team total here at 27.5.
Weather permitting, of course.
Weather permitting.
That's where I am with that team total. I'm just going to wait to see what the weather's like. Great stuff with Philip Nelson, as always. There's your Week 16 NFL preview. Thursday, we'll be recording a college football playoff first-round preview So look forward to that on the channel as well. That'll be posted later tomorrow. Shout out to everyone tuning in. Hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And let's wrap it up with best bets here for Week 16. Philip, where are you headed for your Week 16 NFL?
Boy, it got dark here real quick. Holy crap.
Yeah, welcome to fucking late September.
Gotta turn a light on.
The shortest days of the year are always this time of year, yeah.
I'm, you know what, for this week, I'm going to go the Rams-Jets total here. I'm going to go over 46 or 46.5, whatever it was. I know DraftKings right now is showing 46, but I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Two defenses that haven't been playing great, especially the Jets. I think the Rams moved the ball on them. Rodgers is getting hot. It looks like, some weight's been lifted off their shoulders offensively. They're figuring things out with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. I think they're going to feed the ball to Breece Hall as well. So I think that this game could go over here. So that's my best bet this week.
I like it. That'll be on my card too. Rams Jets over 46.5. It looks like the best total number out there right now is 46.5. So we'll go with that. 46.5 over LA Rams, New York Jets for Philip Nelson with his best bet. My best bet. Let's go to Sunday Night Football. And there is actually a 3.5 out there at Circa in Las Vegas with this side. Tampa Bay minus 3.5 against Dallas. I like the Bucs this week. I like their team total over as well. And I think Dallas comes back down to earth after their win against Carolina. You're not playing the Panthers anymore. Baker and company playing great football. Bucs minus 3.5 against the Cowboys. Sunday Night Football for my best bet here for NFL Week 16. Phil, great show as always. Any final closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, what a slate of football games this weekend. I'm excited to watch the college games. I'm excited to watch all these games. A lot of this at stake here. So good luck to everybody, and looking forward to doing the show next week as well.
No doubt. Great show as always. We appreciate everyone tuning in. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week 16. Enjoy all the games and good luck in the NFL. And we'll be back next week for another NFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.